So, I guess this could be like a part 2 of the whole situation with Miss S and J. Or Miss S as she calls herself. But she's not calling herself the real woman, the guy. But there's some audio that I want to add into the beginning, but I don't really know if I'm going to be able to. I don't even really think the other phone recorded it, to be honest. But I think maybe I could summarize it. In the audio, I was talking about my older scapegoat sister that was driven insane from all the abuse and gaslighting in SA. And I mentioned how, like, at one point in time, she had got this God family, quote unquote, or adoptive family, whatever in the world, when my mom and her husband had kicked out all of my older siblings on her side, being my mom's side, which was like, what was it, 6 of them? Hold up. No, it was 4. But maybe it was more than that. Actually, not. It couldn't have been. So all 4 of them at like 14, kind of younger, off and on. And so my older scapegoat sister, I think that she met this family, I really don't know how, at some point in time when she was homeless at 13 or 14 or whatever. And I mentioned how, to make a long story short, without going into an irrelevant little rant, they called themselves helping her, and I remember my mom would always say that these people, and even some foster/adoptive grandma she found somehow, felt like she was funny acting. Because, like, after a while, they all were conditioned, or kind of cornered, I guess I could say, into going back to our quote-unquote mom due to lack of options, which is really common, because it's like, you have a whole bunch of trauma, there really is no help. You were never taught life skills, or stereotypical life skills that revolve around surviving in the matrix and being able to get a job. So, typically, you're going to get reeled back into the abuse. It's also hard to even get a job while homeless, and then there's a lot of ageism with that as well. So, like, it's just a lot of stuff. Then, oftentimes, when people are kicked out, they're still reported as a missing person to smear campaign them and make them look bad. Which, I mean, even that can really affect you getting a job, but that's another video. So, anywho, they felt like my older scapegoat sister was funny acting. It's like, she would come around, then she would go, and people felt like she just only wanted to talk to people when she needed something. And it's like, stuff like that is one of the many reasons that I'd really rather not ask people for stuff. Because it's like, for one, people are really half safe, and I don't want to be seen as needy, but it's like, if I already know that, like, there's, like, some stuff with someone where I'd rather not really be around them because it could be risky, or just, like, there's some weird stuff with that, I'd rather not ask them for anything, because it's like, it's going to seem really sometimey and fake. That's not how I want to be seen. But it's also like the attachment issue side, like the MPDs, the CPTSD, the DID, the BPD, all that stuff. Not that I really like mental labels, but like all that stuff revolves around attachment issues as well, and things that people could easily label off as sometimey. Not to mention the cognitive dissonance when it comes to going back to the abuser, and also the lack of options as well. The abuser being our mom mostly. And then it's like, these people were like in some type of religious something. I kind of mentioned this in the audio I had recorded, but kind of like don't have on this phone. And to make a long story short, this whole situation had happened where my mom had got our Freemason uncle to talk the police into knocking down my older scapegoat sister's door, because she said that she was missing, and like ever since she unblocked her, which she left that part out, but ever since she unblocked her, she hadn't answered the phone. That's a long story I'm not going to go into. But we went back to the state that we used to live in because my older scapegoat sister still lived there. and my mom was trying to figure out where she was. And so our Freemason uncle, who also is a police officer, was able to scare the police department in town into knocking down her door. And no, I forgot that's not even what I meant to say, actually. Leading up to that, before that, my mom was running around asking people if anybody had seen her or talked to her. And that's when I first met this adoptive family, I guess I could say. And I remember one of the girls who was related to some of the people somehow. She was in 5th grade with me, which was the last grade I went to. And I remember my mom would tell me that that girl was my sister technically. And it's like she last knew me, if she could even recognize me, because like I'm so like underweight and underdeveloped that people probably wouldn't even assume I'm the same person, because they would assume that I just like look a lot different than I do. So if she even recognized me, I would feel like if she does know anything about trauma, which most likely she doesn't, she would just know that the whole situation is really telling, because I was known as the obviously traumatized hypersexual person who was probably being essayed at home. Dang, is my phone on 4? And it's like, honestly, her seeing this situation, if she was even really told what was going on, will probably be telling, knowing that I'm also related to these people, of like the whole situation and how there's just a lot of issues going on in the family system. And anywho, I saw her because the family had told my mom that she could meet them at their church, which I find really weird. I feel like that's like the weirdest place to go and like talk about this type of issue. But they hadn't really talked to her, and they said that like she's always been sometime and all that stuff. And then there's this whole funny thing that happened where like the pastor, who was obviously a Freemason, I can always tell. Honestly, most of them are. They're all, not all, but majority of them are Freemason Luciferians under the pagan Roman Catholic Church. And I can always tell the Black Boule Freemasons, which a lot of the public transportation drivers, city bus drivers and school bus drivers and Greyhound drivers are also Masons, which is why they have the weird Jezebelic attitude problems they do, where they feel like they can talk to you any type of way, and they do their whole I'm growing, you're a child thing, and if you even like ask them a question, they'll tell you you can't get on the bus, which is going to be my next video actually, because there's this whole situation that happened last night where this girl like called herself confronting the bus driver, because he was talking to people crazy, but really you can't confront them. Those Freemasons are sick in the head. They think that because they've done all those rituals and they're Eastern Star this and Greek letter that they can talk to people any type of way. But there's no point in doing anything but grave rocking / stonewalling. I don't even respond to all that stuff, because at the end of the day, I'm not in the predicament to be getting told I can't get on the bus, but also there's really no point in arguing with people like that. But I get why the girl did it in the video I have, or the video I kind of have, because it's not that much of the situation. That's kind of irrelevant, but that's what made me think about, because I have a video I'm going to make about that. I've been wanting to actually, but anyhow, the pastor had gave this whole weird sermon, I guess it was a sermon. I can't remember if it was Easter or Mother's Day, but I think he was talking about both, but not, because it wasn't springtime. I don't even know, is that in spring? But overall, the sermon was about women prostituting to feed their kids, and he was talking about that's how you know that women love their kids, because they prostitute to feed their kids. And I was like, what is this? And I remember my older neighbor sister was like, yeah, that's why I don't go to church, because what the F was that? And me and my younger sister, we would have inside jokes about different things that happened, because I had learned the humor coping mechanism from my dad, and my older neighbor sister, which is my one full sibling, she also has that coping mechanism about making jokes about things that are honestly really serious. Not that this was serious, not that serious, but like, we had an inside joke about that whole situation for as long as we could remember it, and I recently remembered that whole thing about the whole women prostituting to feed their kids sermon. Yeah, I remember my older neighbor's sister was like, he's probably talking about somebody in the church, to be honest, because oftentimes churches will do weird, funny stuff where they'll gossip about each other, and then they'll do a sermon on what they heard about somebody. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know about all of that. I don't know if that's the situation, but it was still really interesting. So, anyways, that's where my mom did that whole talking thing again, which I had always done about this sister, the scapegoat sister, over the years. And the point I'm getting at, which is like, people who aren't trauma-informed are really never going to be safe. One, they see nothing wrong with the issue of abuse and trauma. They call it discipline or just what happens in families. These people were not in the predicament to really be quote-unquote helping anybody. I'm not saying that to be rude to them. Like, it is good that they did the things that they did do, because, I mean, like, she really was in a bad predicament, but, like, nobody was really able to do what really needed to be done. And the gaslighting and stuff got to her, and she was driven insane. And it's a really unfortunate thing. Like, I recently saw some pictures, or I came across some pictures, and it's like, shoot, she looks even worse than the last time I saw her, which I just so happened to run into her when I went back to NC in December or January. And that whole thing happened with, like, the whole 15 degrees and snowing. But when I went to a gas station to get something to eat, I saw her. I just so happened to see her. She just walked up, which is, like, really interesting. I guess I could say miraculous, but it was still upsetting because, like, she was even worse than, like, the last time I saw her before. But it's just a really scary situation. It's like, obviously nobody really knew what really needed to be done, because most people are so brainwashed into the normalization of abuse, especially in some communities more than others. Not that, like, I wouldn't say anybody's doing, like, abusive stuff less, really, but I would definitely say that, like, some communities at least try to hide it, but some of them, like, especially with melanated people and southern people, have been taught to parade child abuse or just abuse in general, of, like, even domestic violence. They've been taught to parade it from the rooftops like it's the best thing ever. And religion played a big role in that, or flipped around religion. Or I guess I could say religion, because it's still the NWO anyways, but still flipped around doctrine is what's used to parade that around. So people just think that's just what happens and it's just whatever and all that stupid stuff. And it's like, she would, I don't know, they just didn't understand trauma symptoms. I don't know how else to put it. And another point that I wanted to get at with that is that, like, you can't really find people to form safe attachments with. There is no safe place for people with no family or abusive family. And also, lastly, I wouldn't even want to really be around somebody that sees me as, like, a puzzle piece to put together, or like a puzzle piece that they need to, like, figure out my life story and, like, manipulate information out of me. Which I had somebody point out to me a couple months ago, that a lot of the Jezebelic let me help you lunatics, as I call them, also seem to be monitoring spirits. They want info out of me, and in my case, the excuse for it is that I'm a quote-unquote child. At least that's the excuse around here, where I'm at now. That's the line people like to throw up, because people have been taught to throw that up, because everybody's so used to abuse and trauma. That's also why in communities like this, and even in the situation like with the bus driver and that lady, whenever somebody's, like, treating somebody horribly, they'll be like, they talk to me like I was a child, but honestly, nobody should be treated that way. But people think, that's where the I'm grown complex comes from. People think that, like, okay, I'm grown now, so now I have the right to not be abused and traumatized and essayed, which typically doesn't stop anyways. It continues to happen, especially if you stay in the family system or in these types of communities, but they still feel like, now that I'm a certain age, now this doesn't happen to me anymore, or at least it shouldn't happen to me anymore. It's all really sick. It reminds me of that video that I meant to make since last January, from when I watched this movie, what was it called? Little, I think? Probably not. Maybe, but I can't really remember. But I know it was like about this lady. She becomes like a rich businesswoman, and she starts treating people like crap, and she's like an abusive boss. But then she gets like strunk or sent back, not sent back in time, but like she gets turned back into a quote unquote child, and she has to like live her life. Not live her life over. This is the horrible like description. She gets turned back into a quote unquote child, and she has to like see why she became the way she did, because she was treated badly as a kid. And the funny thing is, she didn't even have like bad parents. She didn't even have a bad family system. She was just bullied, which I really feel like it's kind of stupid that like just that alone made her become one of the I'm grown complex people. But in that movie, there was this whole scene where like people were scared to talk back to the boss, and they didn't want to fight the boss. But when she was turned into like a quote unquote child, somebody was like, she needs a whooping. And it just shows that people just want to torture whoever they feel like they have control over and they can have power over. It's all about, it's sadomasochism, if that's somehow said, which, as I always mention, whoopings are sexual abuse. But it's all being sadistic. People want power and control. It's about power dynamics. And most people never grow out of it. And that's why in these people's mind, like with the situation with my older scapegoat sister, which, like I'm saying, I'm not trying to bash them, but people just never learn typically. Like, if you already know about this stuff and you're not like 40, then you're lucky, because people never really learn this stuff. It's all too normalized, which is why everybody's screwed up in the head. But this might just have to be a part 1, because this is already too long. And I don't even want this to be an hour-long video, but this is going to be my intro to the part 2 of the Miss S situation. The real woman of God, let me help you, lunatic. But it's like, my older scapegoat sister just due to all the essay, things just got worse. Sexual addiction gets worse. You split and fracture more, and most people really aren't that safe. People are always talking about, well, not always. I mentioned in other videos, and even used as a thumbnail, the Patrick T.M. post, have safe people or not safe people. But I would honestly say that it seems like everybody's either half safe or not safe at all. Kind of like I mentioned in one of these videos, it may have been like the, what people don't tell you about, like, after running away or getting kicked out. I think was it that one? The video where I mentioned how, like, I notice that everywhere I go, I have people come up to me and fearmonger me and really warn me about themselves. And a lot of women do it especially. Which can even go back to the whole thing with, like, women will often, like, talk junk to you and curse you out. And then the dudes will just want to sexually assault you. But typically, the women want to get with you too, but they won't admit it. That can even go back to the whole North Carolina situation with the Catholic Church storm shelter thing, where like that girl who was 19 at the time, she was trying to like bring me under her wing and tell me that I could learn a thing or two from her, but honestly, But the girl who was getting essayed, well, full-blown R-worded and getting impregnated by the dudes at the shelter, because she was trying to get away from the women at the shelter who were toxic and Jezebelic, which is mostly 2 of them, really. They were like the main issue, and they wanted to fight her because she was a quote-unquote hoe. That was their excuse, or at least that was their new excuse, even though she was getting assaulted by grown men, which is also one of the many reasons why shelters aren't safe, because like, even at that same shelter, which was really a Catholic church, but they like turned it into a shelter due to the storm. Like, one of the staff, the bus driver for the family shelter, he was a known Chelmo. Like, people would talk about how his girlfriend was like 15, 16 or something, and he was into pederasty, and how like, quote unquote, he was a good guy, but his girlfriend cheated on him and told him that the baby was his, but she still brings the baby to see him. Even though it's not his, he still like talks to the baby and stuff. And it's like, honestly, that's really stupid. It's stupid on both ends. Like, I don't even understand, unless you want somebody to help her take care of the baby, I wouldn't bring a baby around him even if it was his. But of course, people in these situations, even when they're 18 plus, in their minds, if they don't think or care, realize that they're being targeted by somebody with paraphilias, which they typically also have paraphilias themselves, but if they don't realize that the person is into pederasty, they don't think that like they're at risk, but the kid and the kid's friends are going to be at risk. And this is something that I've always said. I think since maybe like 10, I've always mentioned to people how like they think that the whole dating chomos thing isn't affecting them, which it still is. But it's like, one of the things about it is that even if you don't feel like you're being hurt in the situation, the kid you have with the chomo and even the kid's friends are going to be at risk of also getting assaulted. But anywho, what was I getting at? I don't know how else to put it. Like, the family just wasn't understanding. And it didn't lead anywhere good. And then, like, the dad dude, he didn't stay with, like, the people whose house we ended up going to, but he was on the girl who's in 5th grade with me. That was, if this is even coming out right, he was her dad, I'm pretty sure. And actually, I had a memory of back then. She wasn't even talking to me. She was talking to somebody else beside me, but she was talking about how she doesn't really talk to her dad. And he had the whole red eyes thing going, and like, I can only imagine. It kind of makes me wonder if my older scapegoat sister may have even been assaulted by like some of the people around there. But it was just so much essay from so many different people, including my mom's husband, which was where that's what a lot of the gaslighting revolved around, which I used to have videos about that situation since the part 1 or 2 channel, when I went back with my mom when we were living with my older neighbor's sister. Because I remember I had that one video where somebody commented, I hate when people lie to my effing face like that, and you can tell that your older neighbor's sister's lying, as I called her, because she just keeps switching the story up. And I remember she was talking about how like even my mom's boyfriend at the time would scream about the essay from the rooftops whenever he would get mad, because everybody pretty much knew about it. Because like my mom's husband, when I was 10 and I first moved in with my mom, he would run around bragging about how his wife's daughters were having oral sex with him and stuff like that. And apparently somebody told my dad about it, and my dad thought that maybe it was me because nobody really knew who all he was talking about. Which is another long story with my other neighbor's sister. And my mom always tried their best to like cover it up. There was so much annoying stuff with that. And it's like, this is why getting out matters so much. But like, I could even go into like how the unfortunate thing about it is that still dealing with the trauma, the generational curses, and the spiritual warfare, it's still so easy to lose your mind. Also because like, typically you're going to end up homeless, because more often than not you don't have a place to go, and then you're going to get treated bad out there as well. This could maybe even be like a part 1 intro to like getting out the family system before you're driven insane. But anywho, let me help you lunatics often have the same issues as you, or really worse issues. They're not safe or in the predicament to be helping somebody. Like they're a sexual predator, they're predatory in other let me help you lunatic ways. They're screwed up in the head and deranged. They're not even financially in the predicament to be helping somebody. Like, some of them will call themselves, like, they'll like lie so they can do things that they really can't do, which is also future faking and breadcrumbing, which is something I may have mentioned in videos about another let me help you lunatic I met. Or at least I hope I did. I think I mentioned in the video titled, what was it? Pity is manipulative. I don't even remember. something about how pity isn't a good thing, which I learned that a long time ago. I learned that way before I left my previous situation. I learned that during the evidence channels. And in fact, a lot of the people that were pitying me, as I used to have videos about, were Euro J3W Rev 29s who had a white savior complex and covert and subconscious racism. There was a lot of stuff with that, but it's like, it was just like they claimed to pity me because like they knew my situation, had seen the stuff that was going on in person or in like the videos, but it's kind of like none of those people really ended up being safe people in the end. And they were all in their own situations as well. Like, one of them eventually started to get jealous of me because I didn't have cognitive dissonance about my abusers. And she wanted to, like, stay with her abusers, but also she didn't feel like she had an option because she couldn't afford a place to stay. And that can even go back to something that I mentioned pretty often, or at least I think I have. I meant to. Which is that I noticed way before I was out here, like, even back looking at situations with my dad at 8 and even younger than that, people who are hidden homeless and do the whole, what people like to call homosexual boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, which is just normalized in like Western culture anyways, hookup culture and all the fornication, date anybody, date somebody for one day, one night stand stuff. But it's like people who are doing the homosexual stuff and they're manipulating their ways into people's houses to get with their kids or just for a place to stay. Like, they don't even get the rap at all that people who decide to be full-blown homeless and just thug it out on their own get. Like, people actually treat you worse when you don't want to manipulate people into stuff, or you don't want to, like, live off of people and stuff like that. Which, to be honest, really, that's not even the original design. People were supposed to help each other, especially family, but, like, the family systems are so unsafe and non-existent. People have to leave or get dumped out, or they were kidnapped by CPS. But either way, or they were kidnapped by somebody else. I forgot to mention that. But anywho, it's like, honestly, I would just automatically assume that anybody offering anything, well, I won't say that because I have good discernment, but since I have good discernment, I know that most people offering stuff aren't safe. Like, and if I haven't learned anything else, which I think I forgot to finish this sentence a while back, the women who are going to come and tell you about how unsafe you are and talk junk to you and all that stuff, they are what they're warning you about as well, just like with sexual predators. Like, I don't think there is a safe side, and I think that, like, in the end, you're going to have to save yourself. And most people do end up stuck out here, I'm not going to lie. Or they do what my siblings do, or did, and they end up having to develop the cognitive dissonance, become like their abusers or worse to survive around them. Become a full-blown Jezebel, become an enabler, continue to be the scapegoat while trying to work your way into the golden child position. Like with my older scapegoat brother, which will probably never happen. Like, I remember my older enabler sister talked junk about him for years because, quote-unquote, our mom was scared and nobody knows where he's at, and he never has a phone and never can answer the phone, and he's always losing his Wi-Fi number. Like, he was, like I said, they were all kicked out at 14, kind of younger, and he didn't show back up until his late 20s. And he didn't shower. I think he stopped taking showers at like 15. So like he wouldn't shower. Last time I was around even. In fact, I didn't see him again until a little before I escaped. That was my first time seeing him in years. And my older enabler sister would always talk about, even when she was still a teenager, how she would just make him seem like the bad guy because he actually didn't come back and really tried to figure stuff out to not have to come back. But he was never able to figure anything out to get his life together. And it's like, from all the trauma, the brain damage from all the drugs that everybody was forced on, because everybody went through the Cash for Kids system, he got the usual bad black boy with ADHD label. And all that stuff that goes along with that. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, he fell into like the stereotypical thug stuff, and of course that didn't help anything. And it's like, honestly, I'd rather fall into like vagabond spirit, which I mean it's not a good thing to have, but like I'd rather fall into the vagabond culture of traveling and being what people like to call a houseless traveler now, than fall into the whole trying to fight to survive gang stuff. And I understand why people fall into it, especially with the social conditioning from like the music industry and the entertainment industry, and how that appeals to people under certain forms of trauma-based mind control. But I'd rather be the person that travels and sleeps in caves and climbs mountains and be the person who falls into like the struggle life stuff, or the stereotypical struggle life stuff. But it's kind of funny because it seems they both have about the same outcomes, and you're seen as a criminal either way. And then it was and then like I know at one point in time, also like maybe a year before I left or something, I could be kind of off, I could be really off actually, but we had my mom and her boyfriend had met the dude before, but I met the dude for the first time. Some dude he had a husband, and apparently he's somebody that my older brother had stayed with at one point in time when he was homeless at 14 and other ages, and the dude had took him in. Which I'm not gonna lie, though, if you can find anybody to take you in, you'd be lucky, but like it's still often so much. I mean, it's never really going to be a safe person. It just seems like safe people do not let people into their house. The same reason people don't get adopted. It's like you can guarantee typically that anybody that's telling you can come live with them is some covert something, either some covert and subconscious racism or something else. And me personally, I wouldn't even want to move into somebody's house, but as I've said before, it is unfortunate that people like Miss S. It is unfortunate that there are no safe people that are as adamant about quote-unquote helping people as people like Miss S and other Let Me Help You lunatics are.